Lila Grace wasn't like the other kids in her third grade class. While most students were busy swapping lunch snacks or gossiping about the latest cartoon series, Lila lived in her own little world. A world full of colors, strange creatures, floating castles, and stars that smiled. She was a quiet child, soft-spoken, with a mess of curly hair and eyes that seemed to always be looking at something far beyond the walls of her Ohio classroom. Her teachers described her as sweet but distracted. Her classmates mostly ignored her, except when they noticed the weird drawings she made in her notebook margins. But Lila didn't mind, because every time she picked up a pencil, the world made sense to her. Every page in her spiral-bound sketchpad was alive. There were scenes of whales swimming through the sky, children walking on rainbow bridges, and trees with faces that told stories if you listened closely. She didn't think much of it. It was just how her mind worked. Then came Tuesday, the day that changed everything. It was a regular morning. The clock struck 9 a.m., and the class was supposed to be solving math problems. But Lila was staring at the clouds outside the window. She saw shapes in them: a lion's mane, a ballerina, a dragon curling around the moon. Her hand moved instinctively to the back of her math worksheet, and in a few strokes, she began sketching, not thinking, just feeling. She didn't notice that Ms. Harper, her teacher, had stopped talking. She didn't notice that the entire class was quiet. She didn't even notice Ms. Harper walking toward her desk, until the harsh slam of a hand hitting her table startled her so hard she dropped her pencil. "Lila Grace," the teacher barked. "Again? You're drawing? In math class? What are we even doing here if you won't pay attention?" The room was silent, save for a few muffled snickers from the other kids. Lila froze. Her cheeks turned red. She looked down at the drawing. Half-finished stars swirling around a girl who floated with balloons. It wasn't even her best work. "Give me that paper," Ms. Harper snapped. "We'll see what your parents have to say about this." She snatched a sheet from Lila's desk, crumpled it in her hand, and stormed back to the front. Lila didn't cry. She didn't say a word. But something inside her shifted. That afternoon, the drawing found new eyes. When Lila got home, she quietly put her backpack down and went to her room. No sketching, no humming, just silence. Meanwhile, her mother, Anna Grace, was going through Lila's school bag, as usual. A lunchbox, a permission slip, and something crumpled. She smoothed out the paper and froze. There, among the math equations and scribbles, was a drawing unlike anything she'd ever seen. Whimsical, vivid, full of emotion. The stars looked like they were spinning. The little girl in the center had Lila's eyes. Anna couldn't stop staring. It felt like stepping into someone's dream. Later that night, she posted a photo of the drawing in a parenting group on Facebook, adding only a short caption. "My daughter drew this during math class." Her teacher wasn't too happy, but I think it's beautiful. She put her phone down and forgot about it. By morning, everything was different. The post had exploded overnight. Thousands of likes, comments from artists, teachers, even gallery owners. How old is she? This is professional level imagination. Don't let that talent go unnoticed. Anna was stunned. She showed the comments to Lila, who looked confused. "They like it?" Lila asked softly. "They love it, sweetie," her mom replied, pulling her into a hug. Back at school, something had shifted. The next day, as Lila walked into class, she braced herself for more stares or snickers. But instead, something weird happened. One boy whispered, "Hey, you're the girl who drew that sky picture, right?" Another asked, "Can you draw me a dragon?" Even Ms. Harper paused. She didn't apologize, but her tone was softer. Maybe, just maybe, people were starting to see her differently. But Lila didn't care about fame. She just wanted to draw. What she didn't know yet was that her life was about to completely change. That a single scolding in math class would turn into a worldwide moment. That soon, art galleries would call. Journalists would write about her. One of her drawings would go on to be sold for a 6-figure charity donation. But at that moment, all Lila wanted was to open her notebook, to pick up her pencil, and return to the world inside her head, where stars smiled and clouds whispered secrets, and nobody ever told her to stop dreaming. Because sometimes the thing you get in trouble for as a kid is the very thing that makes you remarkable. After that embarrassing moment in class, being scolded in front of everyone for simply doing what she loved, Lila Grace didn't draw for 3 whole days. For an 8-year-old who used her pencil like it was an extension of her heartbeat, that silence was heavy. But what Lila didn't know was that while she was keeping quiet, the world was getting louder. Her drawing wasn't just a scribble. It was a spark. On the other side of town, her mom, Anna, was staring at her phone, stunned. The Facebook post she casually uploaded the night before, the one with the crumpled drawing and that short caption, had blown up overnight. It had started with a few likes from fellow moms, then shares, then comments from people Anna didn't even know. This child has vision. I'd frame this. I teach art at high school, and this is more expressive than half the portfolios I see. Please tell me she's in art school? And then came the messages, first from a local artist, then a gallery owner in Chicago, then, unbelievably, a journalist from the Art Times asking for an interview. Anna blinked at her screen. Was this real? She walked over to Lila's room and knocked gently. "Sweetheart," she said, "do you remember that drawing? The one your teacher took away?" Lila looked up from her pillow, unsure. "Yeah." Well, her mom smiled, sitting beside her. Turns out a lot of people think it's kind of amazing. The world begins to notice the unseen. Within a week, the drawing had been reposted on Twitter, Instagram, and even Reddit. A digital artist recreated it as a 3D scene. A teacher in London printed it out and hung it in her classroom with the words, "Creativity deserves space to breathe." A well-known YouTuber who features child prodigies made a video about Lila, without even knowing her last name. In that video, he zoomed in on her hand-drawn stars and said, "This isn't just cute. There's rhythm here. Flow. It's as if she sees the world in layers the rest of us can't." The comment section exploded. Thousands of people wanted to know more. Who is this girl? Where could they see more of her art? Lila's response? "I just draw what I see in my head." When Anna gently told her daughter how many people loved her drawing, Lila didn't react the way most kids might. She didn't cheer or brag or jump around. She blinked a few times. "Really?" she whispered. "But I didn't even finish it." That night, Lila opened her sketch pad again. And just like that, as naturally as breathing, she began to draw. This time it was a train floating above a city made of glass, each window showing a different world. There were no rulers, no grids, no plans. She simply saw it and copied it down. Then came the email that changed everything. 3 days later, an email popped into Anna's inbox from someone named Clara Westbrook. She was a curator from the Children's Creative Arts Gallery in New York City. She had seen Lila's drawing on Instagram. She didn't ask for proof or press for details. Her message was short. "This child has something rare. We'd love to feature her in our upcoming Voices of Tomorrow exhibition. We don't usually showcase artists under 12, but exceptions are made when the art demands it." Anna's hand shook as she read it out loud to Lila. Lila's response? "Do I have to wear a dress?" The first time her work hung on a gallery wall. A month later, Lila stood inside a gallery in Manhattan, sneakers on, ponytail messy, staring at a framed drawing under soft white lights. It was titled, "The Girl Who Floated Away." People were gathered around it, murmuring. Some were taking photos. One woman stood there for nearly 10 minutes without saying a word. When asked how she came up with the idea, Lila simply said, "I don't know. I just see stories in the air, I guess." Someone in the crowd whispered, "She's like a young Van Gogh, but with joy." The experts had no explanation. Art professors analyzed the balance in her lines, the emotional resonance of her characters, the dreamlike surrealism. But when asked how an 8-year-old with no formal training could create something so layered, so sophisticated, they shrugged. Some things, one critic said, can't be taught. You either have the gift or you don't. And Lila had it. Not that she cared about all the noise. The attention, the headlines, the interviews, they didn't mean much to her. What mattered most was that she could draw freely, that no one was telling her to stop. And for the first time in her life, people weren't asking her to pay attention. They were asking her to teach them how to see the world the way she did, because her doodles weren't distractions. They were visions. Lila Grace didn't set out to be famous. She didn't want the spotlight. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She just wanted to put pencil to paper and let her imagination breathe. And in doing so, she reminded the world of something we often forget. Genius doesn't always raise its hand. Sometimes it sits in the back of the class, quietly drawing stars in the margins. It started with a tear, a small, silent one, the kind an 8-year-old hides by looking down and pretending to be fine. Lila Grace had never meant to cause trouble. All she wanted was to draw. But when her teacher scolded her in front of class, snatched her doodle, and crumpled it like trash, something inside her cracked. She didn't cry loud. She didn't protest. She just stopped drawing. For 3 days. And for a girl who saw magic in everyday shadows and faces and clouds, 3 days without drawing felt like being trapped in a world with no color. But what Lila didn't know, what no one in that little classroom knew, was that her tear that day would be the beginning of something much bigger than any scolding could have ever predicted. What happens when a small voice gets heard? After Lila's drawing was posted online by her mom, Anna, the internet did what it does best. It noticed something extraordinary hiding in plain sight. People from all over the world shared the image. Art bloggers called it whimsical genius. Therapists praised it for its emotional depth. Musicians said it looked like a song frozen in time. Even graphic designers admitted they could learn from her sense of movement and color. But none of it felt real to Lila. Not until the night they watched a video together. A YouTuber had put together a 5-minute spotlight titled, "The 8-Year-Old Who Sees the World Differently." Lila sat cross-legged on the couch, cheeks pink, eyes wide. There were her drawings. There was her story. And there were thousands of people commenting things like, "I'd buy her art in a heartbeat. This kid has something special. Reminds me of why I started drawing." Her voice was being heard, and it was saying something the world hadn't realized it needed to hear. Sometimes the kids who get scolded for not paying attention are the ones who are actually seeing the most. The day she took the stage. 2 months after the drawing went viral, Lila received an invitation to an international art conference for young talents hosted in Los Angeles. It wasn't the kind of event where you'd expect to see a shy, pencil-stained third grader. But this year, the theme was art beyond the classroom, and her story had become the symbol of that message. Lila didn't want to speak. She told her mom, "I just want to draw, not talk." So instead of giving a speech, they gave her a canvas. Right there on stage, under the lights, Lila began to sketch. No plan, no pressure, just her and her pencil. The crowd, hundreds of artists, educators, and media professionals, watched in awe as, stroke by stroke, a picture came to life. A girl floating in a paper boat, being carried by a river of stars. When she finished, the room exploded in applause. Lila blinked, looked up, smiled. It was the first time in her life applause had been meant for her, not because she got a good grade or followed directions, but because she followed her heart. More than just a viral moment. Most viral stories fade in a week. Not Lila's. Her artwork was featured in Time for Kids. A German publisher reached out about turning her sketches into a children's book. A foundation in Kenya contacted her family, asking if they could use her art to help raise awareness and funds for underprivileged children's education. Lila said yes. And when she learned that some kids couldn't afford pencils or paper to draw their own dreams, she didn't just nod and feel sad. She did something. She gave away her first painting. It was a digital print of the girl who floated away, signed with her tiny, careful signature, Lila G. The print was auctioned online, and to everyone's shock, it sold for $92,000. Every cent was donated to build a small community art center for children in Nairobi. That was the moment the applause became more than just noise. It became purpose. Back in the same classroom, something had changed. Months after her first drawing was taken and crumpled, Lila returned to the same classroom for the last week of school. The walls were still beige. The desk still scratched, but something was different. On the bulletin board near the front of the class hung a print of her now famous artwork, neatly framed and titled, "Never Stop Dreaming." Ms. Harper, her teacher, didn't ignore it. She stood in front of the class one afternoon and said, "I want to say something to all of you. Sometimes we teachers focus so hard on getting everyone to follow the rules that we forget to look at who they really are. I want you to know, Lila, I see you now. We all do." Lila didn't speak. She just smiled and kept drawing, because the greatest applause comes from within. In a world obsessed with achievement, grades, trophies, and gold stars, Lila Grace taught us something much simpler and infinitely more powerful. Listen to the quiet kids. Watch their hands. Notice the ones who draw when they should be memorizing math. They might be dreaming up the future. Today, Lila continues to draw every single day. Not because the world is watching, but because drawing is the way she breathes. And the girl who was once told to pay attention now has the world's full attention. From a tear in a classroom to a standing ovation around the globe, Lila Grace didn't just draw a picture. She drew a path, and she walked it. In a quiet corner of Lila Grace's home, on a desk scattered with colored pencils, worn erasers, and sketchbooks filled to the brim, one painting stood out. It wasn't the most detailed she had ever made. It wasn't the most colorful either, but it was different. It was the one she made the night after she found out that not all children had a safe home, let alone a place to draw. She had been watching a short documentary with her mom, a story about kids in war zones, using bits of charcoal to sketch on the walls of shelters, sometimes on the ground, because they had no paper. Lila watched in silence. When the screen faded to black, she turned to her mom and simply asked, "Can I draw something for them?" Anna nodded, and that's how the girl with the sky in her hands was born, an image that spoke louder than words. The painting was simple, a young girl standing on cracked earth, no shoes, torn dress, but in her cupped hands she held a piece of the sky, vibrant blues, stars twinkling, clouds curling like waves. No one could explain exactly what made it so powerful. But when Anna posted it online with the caption, "She drew this after asking why some kids don't have crayons," the internet broke down. Within 24 hours, the post had over 2 million shares. Art critics, influencers, school teachers, war reporters, and celebrities began reposting it with captions like, "This hit me like a ton of bricks." No words, just emotion. This child understands more about humanity than most adults. It was as if Lila's brush had reached into people's hearts and pressed something they didn't know was even there, an auction that made history. 3 weeks later, the CEO of a global charity, Hope Hands International, contacted Anna. They didn't just want to feature the art in their annual gala. They wanted to auction it. The event was held in New York City, a dazzling ballroom filled with philanthropists, tech giants, musicians, and humanitarians. Everyone knew that one special piece would close the night, a framed original print of Lila's girl with the sky in her hands. Lila, in a blue dress, she said matched the sky in her painting, sat with her mom in the front row. Her legs swung nervously under the chair. The auctioneer stepped up. "Ladies and gentlemen, our final piece tonight. Created by an 8-year-old girl whose art has reminded the world the innocence we must protect, the beauty we must believe in, and the children we must not forget." The bidding started at $10,000. It hit $50,000 in seconds, then $100,000. People gasped when it crossed $300,000. At $500,000, a silence fell. Then a final voice spoke. $1 million. The room erupted. A woman, a poet from South Africa, had won. She walked on stage, hugged Lila, and said, "This painting will hang in my country's National Children's Museum, so no child ever forgets what hope looks like in small hands." How a single painting changed real lives. That one auction did more than make headlines. It fully funded 3 mobile art therapy buses for displaced children in Syria and Ukraine. It provided thousands of sketchbooks and pencils to schools and refugee camps. And perhaps most incredibly, it launched the Sky in Her Hands project, a nonprofit in Lila's name that would continue raising funds through art made by children for children. Lila didn't ask for any of it. She still said things like, "I just like to draw when my brain feels full," or "I didn't know grown-ups like kid art." But deep down, she started to understand that her drawings weren't just pictures anymore. They were messages. And the world was finally listening. The ripple effects no one saw coming. After the auction, teachers from around the world began using the girl with the sky in her hands as a teaching tool, not for technique, but for empathy. In Brazil, a teacher reported that after showing the painting to her class, a group of students raised money on their own to buy art supplies for a nearby orphanage. In Canada, a school district added a new curriculum module titled The Power of Storytelling Through Art, inspired entirely by Lila's work. In Japan, a children's hospital painted a full mural inspired by Lila's painting, covering the oncology war with stars and sky fragments, so young patients could hold the sky, even when they couldn't go outside. Lila didn't know all the details, but she did get letters, boxes of them, crayon notes from kids in Uganda, watercolor postcards from France, emails printed out from teenagers in Taiwan saying, "Your painting made me want to live again." It was a lot for a child, but her mom always reminded her gently, "You didn't change the world, sweetie. You just reminded it to look up." One girl, one brush, a whole world moved. Years from now, people might forget the auction price. They might even forget Lila's name. But they won't forget that once, in a world full of chaos and scrolling news feeds, a little girl made the whole planet stop. Not with a speech, not with a viral dance, not with $1 million campaign, but with a painting, one image, of a barefoot girl, holding the sky. Because sometimes the most powerful things don't come from the loudest voices. They come from the quiet ones, the ones who draw what we feel but can't say. Years had passed since the night Lila Grace painted the girl with the sky in her hands. She was no longer the tiny girl who sat cross-legged on the floor with markers staining her fingers and hair tied up in a messy ponytail. She had grown in height, in age, and in understanding. But in many ways, she was still the same, quiet, curious, and always holding a pencil like it was a key to another world. By the time she turned 16, the little painting that once went viral had become a symbol in its own right, not just of hope, but of action. But what made Lila's story remarkable wasn't just what she did when she was a child. It was what she chose to build from it as she grew older. This is a story of how a girl who once got scolded for doodling in class left behind a legacy far greater than she could have ever imagined, the birth of a movement. After the success of her painting and the global outpouring of love that followed, Lila and her mother, Anna, launched the Sky in Her Hands Foundation, an organization focused on giving children in conflict zones access to creative outlets. At first, it was just one small initiative, a mobile art therapy van that traveled to refugee camps in Jordan. Inside were shelves of donated art supplies, easels, and a team of young volunteers who believed in the healing power of creativity. But the response? Overwhelming. Children who hadn't spoken in months began to draw. Some painted their dreams, others their memories. A few cried while sketching, releasing what their young minds couldn't put into words. From there, the idea grew wings. Lila and her team expanded the program to Ethiopia, Ukraine, Palestine, Colombia, and even impoverished inner-city schools in the U.S. And every time they opened a new center or sent out a new mobile van, Lila insisted on the same rule. There are no bad drawings, only honest ones. The girl who never stopped drawing. Despite her global impact, Lila never stopped being an artist. She would often wake up at 3 a.m. with an idea and sketch by flashlight under a blanket, just like when she was a kid. Her drawings matured with her, more layered, more abstract, but they never lost that unmistakable heart. She rarely gave interviews, but when she did, she'd say the same thing. "I'm not trying to change the world. I'm just trying to draw what I see, and sometimes what I hope will become." Her paintings began appearing in museums, classrooms, even hospitals. But Lila had a rule. For every painting sold in a gallery, a free print must be donated to a school, orphanage, or child-focused nonprofit. She believed that art didn't belong only to the wealthy. It belonged to anyone who needed to feel something. And people listened. When the world came knocking again. One day, Lila received a letter. It was from a teenage girl in Afghanistan who had been forced to flee her home. The letter was shaky, the English broken, but the message was clear. I had nothing, but I saw your painting once in a book. I traced it over and over until I remember how to hope. That letter rocked Lila to her core. She hung it on her bedroom wall, above her desk, and it was that same night she decided the next chapter of her foundation's work. Legacy Labs, a program that trained teenagers in refugee zones to become art mentors for younger kids in their communities. I can't be everywhere, Lila said, but maybe my brush can be. And just like that, her mission evolved again, not just to create, but to multiply creation, passing the torch. At age 21, Lila stood on stage at the United Nations Youth Assembly to speak about her journey. It was her first major public appearance. She wore a simple white dress. No makeup, no big intro. Just her and her story. I was once a little girl who was told to stop scribbling in class. I was told to sit down, be quiet, color inside the lines. But what if I had listened? What if I had stopped drawing? I'm here today not because I was the best artist. I'm here because my mom saw something in my scribbles. She didn't just see color. She saw a cry for something more. And today I ask you, what would happen if we stopped silencing the colors in our kids? The room stood in silence. And then applause that seemed to last forever. A legacy in every stroke. Today, Lila's foundation operates in 37 countries. She's written 2 books, one for kids, one for educators, both titled Draw the Sky. The original painting, the girl with the sky in her hands, still hangs in the Children's Art Museum in Cape Town, protected by glass, but open to every child who visits. It said that every morning, dozens of kids line up to sit in front of it, sketchbooks in hand, tracing hope onto paper. And every year on the anniversary of the painting's first auction, the foundation hosts a global event called Color the World Day, where children from around the globe send an art based on a single theme. What does the sky mean to you? Tens of thousands participate, and each piece is saved, scanned, archived, and published in a digital museum open to all. From scribbles to a story that stays. Lila never wanted to be famous. She never chased interviews, book deals, or awards. She just wanted kids to feel what she felt the day she painted her first sky, free, seen, and safe. Her story reminds us that legacies aren't always written in ink. Sometimes they're painted, with messy hands, wild colors, and hearts too full to keep it all inside. Because in the end, what mattered most wasn't how good the drawing was. It was that it was drawn at all. And somewhere in the world tonight, another child picks up a crayon and dares to believe that what they draw might matter. Thanks to Lila Grace, it already does.